Sa-rin married her sweet and caring boyfriend, completely unaware of the monster-in-law that awaited her. Her husband's mother favors her son to an outrageous degree. Think of serving him delicious, freshly cooked rice, while Sa-rin gets 2-day-old leftovers. He gets the best cuts of fish. She gets a sad piece of radish. Sa-rin even brings home treats for everyone, only to be scolded for overspending. And the hypocrisy? Don't even get me started. When Sa-rin has to go on a business trip, her mother-in-law flips out, worrying about how her precious son will manage without her. The real drama kicked off with the mother-in-law's birthday. Sa-rin, being a thoughtful and dutiful daughter-in-law, hadn't forgotten. But her husband kept blowing up her phone with reminders, as if she would. He even specifically requested seaweed soup for his mom's birthday breakfast. So, the night before, Sa-rin and her husband went to his parents' house to prepare. Sa-rin brought a beautiful bouquet, which brightened her mother-in-law's face. Trying to be helpful, she offered to cut up a melon, even though she had no idea how. She ended up having to consult the internet. Despite being a first-timer, the fruit platter turned out pretty well. But here's where things get frustrating. The mother-in-law noticed her son was tired, and immediately ushered him off to rest, completely disregarding Sa-rin's exhaustion after a long day. And of course, she reminded Sa-rin to take good care of her precious boy. Sa-rin, practically dead on her feet, could only silently massage her legs to stay awake, while chatting with her mother-in-law. The next morning, before the sun was even up, Sa-rin woke up and tried to get her husband to help prepare the birthday meal. He didn't budge. So she slaved away in the kitchen for over 2 hours, single-handedly preparing a feast. The mother-in-law's first reaction? To tell her daughter to take pictures of the food. And the husband? He didn't even acknowledge Sa-rin's hard work. During the meal, Sa-rin discovered that her mother-in-law didn't even like seaweed soup. It was her sister-in-law's favorite. The family chatted about things Sa-rin couldn't understand, leaving her feeling isolated. No one even noticed when she struggled to reach a piece of meat across the table. Then, when she finished her food quickly, her mother-in-law criticized her for eating like a pig. To avoid further awkwardness, Sa-rin excused herself to prepare some fruit. As soon as she brought the fruit platter out, her mother-in-law told her to wash the mountain of dishes, saying she'd eat the fruit later. Sa-rin carried load after load of dishes to the sink, with no one offering to help. The family laughed and talked while she toiled away alone in the kitchen. By the time she finished, only a few pieces of kiwi remained. Exhausted and defeated, Sa-rin mumbled that she didn't like kiwi. This is one of the most badass daughters-in-law I've ever seen. Faced with these unreasonable demands, she's definitely got a spine. Who says daughters-in-law have to put up with this kind of treatment? Tonight was the night of the big birthday dinner for Sa-rin's mother-in-law. But of course, it was during rush hour. Sa-rin was frantic about being late and earning her mother-in-law's disapproval. The rest of the in-laws put on a brave face, but their annoyance at the thought of a senior waiting on her juniors was palpable. The older son and his wife arrived first. Since it was the mother-in-law's birthday, the older daughter-in-law wanted to order seaweed soup. Her younger sister reminded her that Sa-rin had already made it that morning. The mother-in-law beamed, praising Sa-rin for being so dutiful and preparing a whole feast bright and early. Everyone chimed in with their compliments for Sa-rin, except for the pregnant older daughter-in-law, who sensed something was amiss. She pointedly asked why everyone had let Sa-rin cook the entire birthday meal alone. The younger sister and brother mumbled excuses about oversleeping, while the mother-in-law chimed in with, "My son doesn't know how to do housework." The older daughter-in-law scoffed. So, on mom and dad's birthdays, the sons and daughters do nothing, and the new daughter-in-law slaves away? The younger siblings argued that it was only natural for the daughter-in-law to prepare for her mother-in-law's birthday. This was the last straw for the older daughter-in-law. There's no rule that says a daughter-in-law has to do anything for her mother-in-law. It's ridiculous. The mother-in-law started to look embarrassed, but the older daughter-in-law pressed on. It's even worse that no one considered that Sa-rin has a job. The rest of the family fumed, but they were speechless. Inwardly, they seethed at what they perceived as Sa-rin's disrespect. Finally, the younger son and his wife arrived. Remembering his older daughter-in-law's earlier words, the father started to scold Sa-rin for being late but trailed off. Sa-rin was mortified to see her pregnant sister-in-law waiting, but her sister-in-law reassured her that she had just arrived herself. When their aunt asked about the delivery plans, the mother-in-law declared that it absolutely had to be a natural birth. The topic shifted to having the husband in the delivery room. The mother-in-law worried her son couldn't handle it, suggested he wait until after the baby was born. Sa-rin stared at her sister-in-law, unsure what to do. The mother-in-law turned to the older daughter-in-law for her opinion. She pointedly ignored the question and continued eating. The mother-in-law asked again. This time, the older daughter-in-law shot back. "Mom, please don't interfere in our affairs. We'll discuss it ourselves." Thank you for your concern. She went back to her food, leaving Sa-rin wide-eyed in disbelief. On the way home, Sa-rin asked her husband about his sister-in-law. He couldn't quite explain in his memory. She had always been someone who did things her way. The older daughter-in-law couldn't help but recall her first experience in this family. It was the Mid-Autumn Festival the previous year, and she and her husband had returned home to celebrate. Upon arrival, her mother-in-law sent her husband off to rest, and immediately pulled her into the kitchen to help with the cooking. Her younger sister-in-law and brother-in-law went out on a date. Fed up, the older daughter-in-law called everyone together. My husband is tired, so he's resting. Dad and my uncle want to drink. My sister and brother-in-law want to go out. Mom is making dinner. Just because I'm the daughter-in-law, does that automatically mean I have to do all the housework? Her sister-in-law accused her of being crazy. Her uncle-in-law insisted it was natural for a daughter-in-law to help her mother-in-law. He then received a phone call and excused himself, promising to help later. The older daughter-in-law was baffled. It was a family meal, yet everyone took it for granted that the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law were solely responsible for everything. The absurdity of it all was just beginning to sink in. Holding back her anger, the older daughter-in-law reminded her husband of his promise. With a curt goodbye to the family, she walked out. Her mother-in-law was stunned, while her husband rushed after her, trying to get her to stay. She calmly told him, "This was bound to happen sooner or later. I trust you'll handle it." And with that, she left. The older son returned home, intending to cook, but his mother shooed him out of the kitchen, declaring that men didn't belong there. Furious, she demanded her daughter-in-law return and cook for the family. The mother-in-law raged about her daughter-in-law's arrogance, while the father-in-law muttered about his son's weakness in letting an outsider disrupt the family. Meanwhile, Sa-rin suddenly remembered her in-law's wedding anniversary. Her co-workers expressed amazement that she kept track of all these dates and managed to handle everything herself. Sa-rin thought a simple cake would suffice. It didn't need to be a big deal. Her mother-in-law called, sweetly asking if she'd eaten. Sa-rin replied that her husband had made breakfast. The mother-in-law's tone immediately changed. She scolded Sa-rin for letting her son cook, reminding her that a good wife should always prepare breakfast for her husband. That evening, back at the in-laws' house, the mother-in-law served her son a steaming bowl of fresh rice, leaving Sa-rin with the leftovers. Sa-rin, used to this treatment, didn't protest. During the meal, the son got a large piece of fish, while Sa-rin received a meager piece of radish. Back home, Sa-rin complained to her husband, who feebly offered to talk to his mother. Then, he told Sa-rin to look at the gift his mother had given her. It was an apron. Sa-rin was speechless. Her husband, oblivious to the insult, prattled on about the variety of apron designs available these days. Feeling frustrated and overwhelmed, Sa-rin invited two married friends over to vent. It turned out they all had similar experiences. Sa-rin recalled Tolstoy's famous opening line, "Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its way." The next morning, Sa-rin woke up to the sound of rain. She wanted to stay home with her husband, but he reminded her they had to go to the ancestral grave to burn incense. He told her to go early to help his mother prepare, since he had never done housework. Sa-rin was dumbfounded. It was his grandfather's grave. She had never even met the man. Why should she have to help? Arriving at the house, before she could even sit down, her mother-in-law ordered her to change and start cooking. When her husband offered to help, his mother declared the kitchen was no place for a man, and sent him off to drink with his father and uncle. The couple exchanged a look. The mother-in-law, after dismissing her son, turned to Sa-rin and said, "Men can't help with these things anyway." Sa-rin was at a loss for words. The men of the house laughed and drank, while the women toiled in the kitchen. On the drive home, Sa-rin confronted her husband, who argued that since he'd never done housework before marriage, his mother would blame Sa-rin if he started now. They began to argue. He complained about the stresses of his job. Fed up, Sa-rin got out of the car. At a coffee shop, she received a call from her sister-in-law, who offered her a concert ticket. Sa-rin assumed it was an apology for not helping earlier, but she misunderstood. Her sister-in-law explained that ancestral rituals weren't their responsibility, and neither of them should feel obligated to attend. Sa-rin's head spun. This was all so exhausting. Alone on a swing, Sa-rin's mind raced. She wondered if her friends had to wash dishes when they visited their boyfriends' families. The thought baffled her. Suddenly, her husband arrived with the news. Her sister-in-law had just given birth. The next day, the mother-in-law excitedly visited her new granddaughter and daughter-in-law. She offered to hold the baby, but her daughter-in-law politely declined, explaining that she'd already hired a babysitter. The mother-in-law was taken aback. She then tried to visit her daughter, who also brushed her off, claiming to be busy. Unable to see either of her children, the mother-in-law called Sa-rin. Meanwhile, Sa Rin's sister-in-law's husband was glued to his video games, refusing to look for work. When his wife confronted him, he exploded, pointing out that he'd never even bought his mother a single piece of clothing. Yet to appease her mother-in-law, she'd taken her on a shopping spree at the mall. Suddenly, she understood what her older sister-in-law had been going through. She called Sa Rin to apologize. She confessed she couldn't stand doing dishes with her mother-in-law any longer, and promised to tell her mother to call her brothers, instead of bothering the daughters-in-law. Sa Rin felt a wave of relief. Since she couldn't change her in-law's traditional mindset, Sa Rin decided to start with her husband. They made a pact to go on a date once a week, to keep the spark alive, and to resolve any arguments before going to bed. That weekend, they planned a romantic getaway to an island. Just as they were about to leave, Sa Rin's mother-in-law called, inviting them for dinner. Not wanting to miss their special time together, Sa Rin lied, claiming a work emergency requiring a 2-day trip. Her mother-in-law reluctantly accepted, and the couple enjoyed their time alone. It was Sa Rin's birthday, and her husband had planned a special surprise. Meanwhile, Sa Rin's sister-in-law, feeling down, saw Sa Rin's happy vacation photos online. She felt a pang of envy, wishing she had such a loving husband. Her mother-in-law constantly criticized her. The next day, she returned to her parents' house alone, claiming her husband and child were busy with work. In reality, her husband was unemployed. Her mother then mentioned how busy Sa Rin was too. Remembering Sa Rin's photos, the sister-in-law blurted out that Sa Rin and her husband were on a romantic getaway. Her mother was furious. On the drive home, Sa Rin received a call from her mother-in-law, who had discovered the lie. Sa Rin braced herself for a lecture. Back home, her husband's attempts to smooth things over only made matters worse. Exhausted, Sa Rin received a text from her sister-in-law, who apologized, explaining she'd assumed everyone knew about the trip. At the 100-day celebration for the older sister-in-law's baby, everyone was enjoying the meal, except for the older brother, who was attentively feeding his wife. The mother-in-law was enraged. "Taking care of children is a woman's job," she exclaimed. "Why is a man doing this?" She snatched the baby, declaring that the mother should be the one caring for the child. The older brother calmly replied that he was perfectly capable, leaving his mother to fume inwardly. She then turned her critical gaze towards her other daughter-in-law. An aunt suggested that the older daughter-in-law should try for a son, since a son would take care of them in their old age. The father-in-law agreed. Unable to take it anymore, the daughter-in-law picked up her baby and told her husband to eat, finally bringing a smile to the mother-in-law's face. Later, Sa Rin woke to the sound of chopping vegetables. Her husband had promised to help with housework this time, but when she tried to wake him, he groaned and refused to get up. Sa Rin almost stayed in bed too, but the clatter from the kitchen was unbearable. She got up to find her mother-in-law already busy preparing food. When her husband finally emerged, he saw Sa Rin's annoyed expression and offered to help, but his mother immediately stopped him. Just then, the father-in-law asked his son to fix the computer, and he quickly abandoned his chore. The mother-in-law pointedly told Sa Rin, "My son is a man. Kitchen work isn't suitable for him." Soon, relatives began arriving. As always, it was only the men and children. The women weren't allowed to attend these gatherings. The mother-in-law couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. A relative thanked her for all her hard work, but the father-in-law scoffed, saying it was her duty. Though she remained silent, the mother-in-law felt a flicker of resentment. After a long, exhausting day, Sa Rin's husband offered to give her a massage and wash the dishes. When she later emerged, everyone was eating, but the scene was disheartening. Sa Rin sat at a tiny separate table. This kind of antiquated arrangement was something she'd only seen on TV as a child, and she never imagined she'd experience it in her own life. A little boy finished his soup and tried to get more himself, but his grandmother stopped him and told Sa Rin to fetch it. Someone remarked on gender equality in modern society. Sa Rin could only laugh bitterly. In this patriarchal family, daughters-in-law and sons-in-law were treated vastly differently. A female relative, overwhelmed by the blatant sexism, took her daughter and left. When her mother-in-law asked what was wrong, her husband claimed they just needed to go home and light incense. Seeing her son washing dishes, the mother-in-law insisted he stop, declaring it wasn't his job. "Dirty work like this is for the daughter-in-law," she said. When Sa Rin's sister and brother-in-law arrived, the mother-in-law showered her son-in-law with attention and prepared special dishes for him. Sa Rin wanted to visit her parents, but her husband was watching soccer with his brother-in-law. Her mother-in-law then asked her to cut some fruit for her sister's husband. Sa Rin was stunned. In this patriarchal family, the disparity between daughters-in-law and sons-in-law was stark. Daughters-in-law were treated like servants, while sons-in-law were pampered like royalty. Sa Rin had planned to visit her parents that day, but her husband seemed to have forgotten. When he finally mentioned going, His mother complained that he should stay and talk to his brother-in-law. He explained that his parents-in-law had been waiting, and his mother suggested he just visit them a week earlier next holiday season. Sa-rin felt a pang of sadness. Despite her obedience, she still felt disregarded by her mother-in-law. Her sister-in-law, recognizing the situation, urged them to leave. The mother-in-law reluctantly agreed, putting on a show of gratitude. On the drive back from her parents' house, Sa-rin remained gloomy, upset by her mother-in-law's attitude. As soon as they lay down, the mother-in-law called her son, inviting them for dinner the following night. Sa-rin, physically and emotionally exhausted, didn't respond. Her husband assumed she was unwell. Sa-rin explained that going back meant cooking and cleaning, and she desperately needed a break. Her husband retorted, "No one's forcing you to cook. You do it voluntarily." Sa-rin asked if he expected his sister and brother-in-law to cook for them. Her husband stormed off, completely failing to understand her perspective. He thought it was just one meal. He recalled his older sister-in-law's absence from his grandfather's memorial service, which had upset his mother. He felt a pang of sympathy for his mother, who had worked so hard. But he had no sympathy for his wife's frustration. He thought she was being selfish. Meanwhile, Sa-rin, exhausted and heartbroken, caught a cold. She dragged herself out of bed to take medicine, and found herself watching their wedding video. Back at his parents' house, Sa-rin's husband saw his brother-in-law on the phone outside. He overheard his sister feigning illness to avoid going back to her in-law's house. He was stunned. He couldn't believe his sister was going through something similar to his wife. Thinking about his sister's struggles, he suddenly understood Sa-rin's exhaustion. That evening, Sa-rin's mother-in-law, tired from a long day, suggested ordering takeout. Her husband, however, complained about the hygiene of restaurant food. Annoyed by his laziness, she refused to cook at all. When their son arrived, he overheard his father criticizing his mother. Thinking about his mother's hard work, he remembered Sa-rin's words. He started to go talk to his mother, but stumbled upon his sister and brother-in-law arguing. His sister refused to return to her in-laws' house, while her husband insisted that serving her in-laws was her duty as a wife. She retorted, "Everyone has hands and feet. Why should everyone wait for me to cook for them?" He finally understood Sa-rin's reluctance to go to his parents' house for dinner. His mother, overhearing her daughter's struggles with her in-laws, finally understood her own daughter-in-law's plight. Sa-rin's sister-in-law handled all the household expenses, making her the primary provider. Yet, her in-laws were ungrateful. Unable to bear it any longer, she demanded a divorce. Her husband flew into a rage, accusing her of being unsupportive and claiming her meager salary wasn't enough to live on. She retorted, "As if you even have the right to touch that money." He slapped her. Her mother, witnessing this, pulled her daughter away, refusing to listen to her son-in-law's explanations. As the sister-in-law recounted her marital woes, her mother wept, heartbroken. They embraced, tears flowing. Back in her room, Sa-rin's mother-in-law looked at Sa-rin's wedding photo and thought about the hardships her daughter was enduring. She realized she'd been too harsh on Sa-rin. Suddenly remembering Sa-rin's lie about the work trip, she picked up her phone and texted Sa-rin, explaining the real reason they had wanted them to come for dinner. Arriving home to an empty house, Sa-rin's husband saw her carefree, smiling wedding photo on the TV. He thought about his sister's mistreatment at her in-law's house, and rushed to the coffee shop to apologize to Sa-rin. But Sa-rin was deeply troubled. The segregated dining table, her mother-in-law's suggestion to visit her parents a week earlier during the holidays. All these incidents had left her feeling resentful. Her husband was surprised by the extent of her unhappiness, but failed to empathize, leading to a huge argument. They parted ways, both furious. Feeling suffocated, Sa-rin asked her boss for a few days off. She left a note for her husband, explaining she needed time and space to think seriously about their relationship. Unable to find her, he remembered her words and began searching for places she might go. Passing by her friend's shop, he overheard them discussing Sa-rin's unhappy married life. Her coworkers filled him in on the details. Back home, he drowned his sorrows in alcohol, finally realizing the extent of his wife's unhappiness. His worried mother called, asking about Sa-rin. He lied, saying her phone had died. He stared at their relationship contract on the refrigerator, mocking himself for his failures. The daughter-in-law, constantly bullied by her traditional mother-in-law, had finally learned to push back. Seeing his wife's suffering, the husband found the courage to change. He told his parents he wanted to visit Sa-rin's parents first during the upcoming holidays. His mother, realizing she'd been too hard on Sa-rin, silently agreed. Though her voice held a hint of displeasure, he declared that they would spend the first day of the new year with Sa-rin's family, and the second with his. His father was not pleased. "There's so much to do during the holidays," he protested. How can we manage without the daughter-in-law's help? His mother, also annoyed, blamed Sa-rin for putting him up to this. Finally, she agreed, telling her husband she would handle everything and giving her son her blessing to spend the holidays however they chose, as long as they were happy. Sa-rin, enjoying her time back home, suddenly spotted her husband and ran to him. He confessed that he finally understood how his assumptions about what was normal were wrong. He wanted her back, promising to be a better husband. He finally realized that before she was his wife, she was a carefree, happy individual. Sa-rin, too, realized that this wasn't anyone else's fault. Perhaps it was her own. She hadn't wanted to disappoint her mother-in-law and had, in the process, lost her joy. Sa-rin returned home, ready for a fresh start. She received an invitation to the Milan International Furniture Fair. However, her father-in-law's birthday coincided with the fair's opening day. She mustered the courage to tell her mother-in-law, but before getting a response, she rushed off, ultimately missing the opportunity due to her hesitation. Sa-rin's mother-in-law sent her money for the plane ticket, encouraging her to go to Milan next year. Although Sa-rin missed the furniture fair to attend her father-in-law's birthday, the choice helped her realize the importance of family. More importantly, she shed the label of the obedient daughter-in-law, learning to say no to her mother-in-law. Have you ever seen such a badass daughter-in-law? When her in-laws criticized her for letting their grandchild get sick, she fired back. What rule says a mother has to take care of the child? You raised my husband and he was always sick. Her in-laws were stunned into silence. Sa-rin, also a daughter-in-law, struggled with the constant nitpicking from her in-laws. Looking at her reflection, feeling lost, her sister-in-law came to comfort her. Sa-rin, she said, this must be really hard for you, but it's not all bad. Everything needs healthy boundaries. She spoke in riddles, leaving Sa-rin unsure if she understood. The next morning, Sa-rin's mother-in-law called, summoning them for dinner. Unable to refuse, Sa-rin resigned herself to another evening of housework, while her in-laws chatted merrily. After finishing, she went to the living room, where her mother-in-law surprised her with a plate of fruit she had set aside. Sa-rin was astonished. She remembered the birthday dinner, where she was left with only a few pieces of kiwi after doing the dishes. This small gesture brought her unexpected joy. As she enjoyed the fruit, her mother-in-law mentioned having a dream where Sa-rin was pregnant. Sa-rin nearly choked. Her father-in-law chimed in, agreeing they should have a grandchild soon. Since their son wasn't ready, the mother-in-law turned the pressure on Sa-rin. Defeated, she nodded. As they left, her mother-in-law handed her a bag of bread, which turned out to be expired. It's still good, she insisted, shoving it into Sa-rin's hands. Have you ever been in this situation? On the drive home, her husband asked her to be understanding of his parents. Sa-rin understood the older generation's thinking, but couldn't comprehend their obsession with grandchildren. He then asked if she wanted children. Sa-rin hesitantly explained their financial constraints and her career aspirations. He understood, saying he was just curious. Sa-rin then remembered her sister-in-law's toddler being made to wipe the table during the memorial service, while the men looked on as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Sa-rin wondered if a daughter in this family would face the same treatment as her niece. She didn't have her sister-in-law's courage and wasn't sure what the right thing to do was. Sa-rin noticed her period was late. At lunch, the delicious food on the table suddenly made her nauseous, while her coworkers ate heartily. She figured she was just tired. The next day, her boss told her that her project was highly valued and would soon be implemented. Sa-rin promised to do her best, but a wave of nausea hit her again. At the pharmacy, she picked up some indigestion medicine, but the pharmacist suggested she might be pregnant. Sa-rin was skeptical, but bought a pregnancy test anyway. She took the test and waited nervously. 2 lines appeared. Sa-rin stared in disbelief. She didn't know what to do. She remembered discussing the future with her husband. They had planned to wait 2 years before having children, and he had agreed. This unexpected development threw her plans into disarray. She went back to the pharmacy for another test. When her husband came home and couldn't find her, he went to the bathroom and found the tests. He was ecstatic, while Sa-rin was in a state of panic. Meanwhile, something happened to her nephew. The daycare had been negligent, and he was injured. When Sa-rin's mother-in-law heard about it, she immediately blamed her daughter-in-law. When she and her younger daughter returned home, they found the son-in-law waiting. The mother-in-law was surprised, and her daughter asked what he was doing there. He claimed he was just dropping off some beef. She was suspicious. He usually resisted visiting. And now he came bearing gifts? He explained that he wanted to make amends for his past mistakes, and asked for another chance. But Sa-rin's sister-in-law remembered the slap the endless housework, and the lack of support. She refused to give him another opportunity. If he truly wanted to make amends, he should file for divorce. Later that evening, Sa Rin and her husband met downstairs. Hearing children laughing, he smiled brightly, while she remained deeply troubled. Sa Rin went to the hospital and confirmed the pregnancy. Her husband was overjoyed, but Sa Rin's anxiety persisted. Back home, he wanted to share the news with his mother, but Sa Rin asked him to wait. He was puzzled. Wouldn't Mom be thrilled? He asked, failing to understand her apprehension. Staring at the ultrasound image, Sa Rin felt conflicted. On one hand, there was her hard-earned career. On the other, the growing life inside her. Their emotions were polar opposites. He was elated, and she was filled with worry. Sa Rin didn't want a baby yet, but she didn't know how to tell her husband. Meanwhile, her sister-in-law arrived home from work to a messy house and immediately started cleaning. When her husband arrived, she asked where their daughter was. He explained that he couldn't skip a work dinner with his boss and had asked her mother to pick up their daughter. "You think that's okay?" she asked. "I deal with people all day at work, but I always make sure I'm on time to pick up our daughter." He argued that it was just one night at her mother's. Furious, she reminded him of their agreement to share childcare responsibilities equally. Breaking that agreement meant more work for one of them. As he tried to explain, her parents called. They rushed over. On the way, he apologized profusely. It turned out his mother-in-law had injured her back while bathing their daughter. The next day, he carried his daughter to his parents' house. His mother, seeing him with the child, immediately asked where his wife was. Mothers should take care of their children, she declared, prompting him to quickly change the subject. Meanwhile, Sa Rin visited her best friend, who was complaining about her husband's lack of help around the house. He, in turn, criticized her for not having dinner ready when he got home. Their friend, listening in, was exasperated. "There's no winning," she exclaimed. Sa Rin's friend felt overwhelmed, lamenting that she hadn't given birth alone. So why was she solely responsible for childcare? Sa Rin didn't know how to comfort her. "If it weren't for my child," her friend confessed, "I would have divorced him long ago." Sa Rin thought about becoming a mother herself and felt a wave of fear. She didn't want to end up like her friend. Back home, she couldn't stop thinking about her friend's struggles and her boss's words. She had always thought she'd be a good mother, but she couldn't even manage her own life, let alone care for a sick child. A sense of panic washed over her. The next day, their babysitter called, saying she had an emergency and couldn't watch their daughter. Both parents had important meetings, so the older brother suggested asking his mother to babysit. His wife reluctantly agreed. When they arrived at his parents' house the next day, his mother told him, "So, bringing her here earlier would have been better, don't you think?" The mother-in-law said, making sure her daughter-in-law heard, "You didn't even want to before. I'll find a babysitter quickly." The daughter-in-law replied, "And I'll cover the cost. You don't need to spend your money on her." "That's outrageous," the mother-in-law exclaimed. "Taking care of my grandchild is my duty." But her daughter-in-law held her ground. "Children should be cared for by their parents. You have your own life. We shouldn't impose on you too much. Don't be so cold," the mother-in-law retorted. "Raising children is full of unexpected challenges. Don't be so unfeeling between family." Her guilt trip silenced the daughter-in-law. On the way home, the older son said, "Mom was so happy to watch our daughter." His wife sighed. "I've always lived my life according to my plans. I believed with enough effort I could achieve anything. But having a child, it's different. Motherhood is hard." Meanwhile, at her checkup, Sa Rin heard her baby's heartbeat, but couldn't bring herself to feel joy. Leaving the hospital, she asked for her mother's homemade noodles. Her husband, beaming, told his mother-in-law the good news. Sa Rin, however, felt a mix of sadness and confusion, unable to confide in anyone. While her husband went to get the noodles, she finally broke down. "I'm not happy about the baby," she confessed. "I feel terrible saying that, but I'm not ready to be a mother." Everyone was celebrating, but no one understood her feelings. Overwhelmed by the pressure, she finally cried in her mother's arms. Her mother held her close, her heart aching. Later, thinking about her daughter's words, she texted Sa Rin, "Don't worry too much. Just prepare yourself mentally for motherhood." Seeing her mother's comforting words, Sa Rin wept again. As the older brother finally got his daughter to sleep, Sa Rin's husband arrived home. He signaled for him to be quiet, but it was too late. They went to the park to talk. "My niece's eyes are always open," the younger brother exclaimed. "When will she ever sleep?" "Be grateful for this," the older brother replied. "When she was first born, she kept us up all night. Raising a child is no easy feat. Every 10 minutes, she'd cry. Just wait until you have your own, you'll see." "Well, I'm about to become a father, too," the younger brother announced. They exchanged grins. The older brother added, "Be good to your wife. Childbirth is incredibly hard on women." Back home, Sa Rin's husband woke her up. promising a surprise. Full of anticipation, she watched as he pulled out 2 pairs of baby shoes. Sa Rin's face fell. She wasn't happy at all. "It's weird that you bought gifts for the baby, but not for me," Sa Rin remarked. "Shouldn't I be the one getting a gift?" He was so focused on the unborn child that he hadn't considered her feelings. "Surprise," he said cheerfully, oblivious to her reaction. He even suggested having twins. Sa Rin immediately pictured her friend's 2 children, fighting endlessly over toys. As he put the shoes away, Sa Rin stared at them, unsure how to feel about the life growing inside her. Meanwhile, Sa Rin's younger sister arrived home late from work to a scolding from her father. She explained she had worked overtime, but he accused her of making excuses and asked if she had behaved this way with her husband. Her mother intervened, but her father continued his tirade. Exasperated, she said, "I tried my best. That's why I chose to get divorced." "You think divorce is the end of it?" He scoffed. "This just shows you're still attached to him. Even if you want a divorce, what if he doesn't agree?" Seeing the tension escalating, her mother stepped in to mediate. Sa Rin's sister felt hurt. Her father's words stung. He hadn't considered her feelings, only wanting her to grovel and go back to her abusive husband. The image of her husband slapping her flashed through her mind. Early the next morning, Sa Rin's mother-in-law called her husband with the news. His aunt had passed away. Because of her pregnancy, Sa Rin couldn't attend the funeral. She asked her husband not to tell his family yet, explaining that the funeral wasn't the right place to announce it. He agreed. At the funeral, an uncle asked where Sa Rin was. Her husband said she had a work commitment. The uncle criticized Sa Rin for being inconsiderate. Her mother-in-law defended her, saying her presence wasn't necessary, especially since Sa Rin had never met the deceased. The uncle accused her of enabling Sa Rin and encouraging disrespect towards elders. The older daughter-in-law has a small child. Her absence is understandable, but Sa Rin skipping the funeral is unacceptable. You shouldn't have to bear this burden alone. The mother-in-law forced a smile. Later she called Sa Rin, who, expecting a scolding, apologized. Instead, her mother-in-law asked about the pregnancy. Surprised, Sa Rin confirmed the news. Her mother-in-law was overjoyed, while Sa Rin remained ambivalent. That evening, her husband came home smelling of alcohol. He explained that everyone was celebrating the pregnancy. Sa Rin reiterated that it wasn't the right time to announce it and that she wasn't ready. He brushed her concerns aside. Sa Rin received a barrage of congratulations from his family, feeling increasingly overwhelmed and unsure how to face this impending motherhood. Her coworkers, noticing her discomfort, asked if she was okay. "Just a little sore," she replied. Her coworker offered to get her coffee, but mindful of her pregnancy, Sa Rin declined. Their team leader approached, and the coworker suggested going out for drinks that night. Sa Rin, though tempted, declined all invitations. Meanwhile, her husband enjoyed a cup of coffee at work. His boss mentioned a new company housing benefit and asked if he wanted to apply. He casually declined. "You'll have a family of 3 soon," his boss pointed out. "Wouldn't you want to upgrade to a nicer place?" He continued, explaining that having a child wasn't just about joy, it also meant significant expenses. His husband, however, hadn't considered this, lost in the excitement of impending fatherhood. Sa Rin's sister, unable to endure the domestic violence any longer, had returned to her parents' home, only to face her father's coldness and criticism. "Are you not my daughter anymore just because you got married?" He'd sneered. At Mi Young's funeral, she dreaded questions about her marriage. Her mother insisted she attend, warning that her absence would fuel gossip. "Just give them vague answers," she'd advised. Reluctantly, Mi Young went. At the funeral, while the men sat and chatted, she and her mother busily prepared everything. Later that night, still hungry, she asked her mother for leftovers. Her father, seeing her eating in the kitchen, launched into a tirade about women failing to maintain their marriages. He told her to endure, have a child, and just live with it. Fighting back tears, she remembered the coldness and disdain from her in-laws. She lost her appetite. Seeing her sadness, her mother scolded her father for his harsh words. He remained stubbornly convinced he was right. Sa Rin stared at herself in the mirror, wondering if she could be a good mother. Her team leader, noticing her distress, asked if something was wrong. Sa Rin brushed it off, but as she turned to leave, her team leader stopped her. "Are you pregnant?" she asked gently. Sa Rin confessed. Her team leader offered congratulations, but Sa Rin felt uncertain, lacking the confidence to be a good mother. Her team leader, understanding her anxiety, reassured her that first-time pregnancy jitters were normal. Sa Rin, worried about the repercussions of hiding her pregnancy, promised to remain dedicated to her work. Her team leader, also a mother, offered her full support. On her way home, Sa Rin saw a pregnant woman walking with her child, and she imagined her future. Her husband arrived home to find her sitting alone on the balcony. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. She replied that she'd never noticed so many pregnant women and children around their neighborhood before. It's probably because you're pregnant yourself, he said. I used to find children annoying, but now I enjoy watching them play. Back home, the couple brainstormed baby names. They researched extensively, but everything seemed ordinary. Then, Sa-Rin suggested a name meaning 10 months of growth in the mother's womb, explaining, whether it's a boy or a girl, I'll learn how to be a mother as my child grows, just like you said. Mom, they both loved it. Sa-Rin seemed to be finally accepting her impending motherhood. Her hesitation had vanished. Have you ever experienced this feeling during pregnancy? One day, Sa-Rin had strong cravings for spicy food, but her husband refused. You're pregnant. You have to think about the baby. Eat healthy things. Sa-Rin reluctantly ate something else. As she got ready for work, he noticed her heels. You shouldn't wear those while you're pregnant, he exclaimed. She switched to sneakers. On her way to work, her mother-in-law called, inviting them for dinner to celebrate the new addition to the family. Overhearing the conversation, her husband declared it was the filial thing to do. He was thrilled, but Sa-Rin couldn't muster any enthusiasm. At work, her boss was surprised by the pregnancy and suggested handing over her project to someone else. Managing a project while pregnant, especially as your belly grows, could delay things. It's better to delegate now. Leaving her boss's office, Sa-Rin looked down at her sneakers, feeling lost. Talking with her coworkers, she felt a pang of resentment. Their lives remained unchanged, while hers was turning upside down. They sipped their fragrant coffee, while she was stuck with tea. She expressed her desire for coffee, but they reminded her it wasn't good for the baby. Her team leader echoed the sentiment, urging her to eat and drink healthily. Sa-Rin felt a surge of frustration. That evening, her best friend celebrated her birthday with a barbecue. Another friend teased her for not choosing something fancier. You have no idea how much I craved barbecue, she replied. I wouldn't even dare to dream of eating out like this. Sa-Rin asked how she could manage leaving her children. My husband never watches them, she admitted. I wanted to go out for my birthday, so I asked my mother to go to my in-laws' house. Suddenly realizing something, she asked Sa-Rin, Are you pregnant? Sa-Rin nodded, admitting she was in awe of her friend for having twins. Her friend sighed. My mother-in-law keeps pressuring me for a girl. Meanwhile, alienated by her father, Sa-Rin's sister decided to move out. 70,000 won is too expensive, Sa-Rin's sister told the realtor. And it's smaller than my previous apartment. Are you renting alone? The realtor asked. Yes. He looked her up and down. You're not so young anymore. Aren't you married? Have you ever been pressured by your mother-in-law to have a second child? Today, the mother-in-law prepared a lavish breakfast for her older son's family. We usually just have a simple breakfast, her daughter-in-law remarked. Your husband needs to eat as soon as he wakes up, her mother-in-law replied. If you don't cook, he'll go to work hungry. It was clear she was doing this solely for her son. Though she didn't argue, the daughter-in-law looked displeased. Her mother-in-law continued. Our grandchild is lonely. Every time we go out, she stares longingly at other children. We're looking into daycare. Her daughter-in-law responded. You two should have another baby while you're still young. Her mother-in-law interrupted. We're not planning on having a second child. Her daughter-in-law stated firmly. Just discuss it before you get too old. Her mother-in-law pressed. You're already bothering me so much with just one girl. With your current situation, it would be so difficult to raise another. It would have been so much easier if you had let me help from the beginning. Her daughter-in-law sighed, feeling utterly defeated. That evening, Sa-Rin and her husband drove to his parents' house for dinner. Sa-Rin was listening to her favorite music when he switched to classical. It's not good for the baby, he explained. You should listen to music that benefits fetal development. Sa-Rin resigned herself to the classical music. At dinner, everyone ate white rice, while Sa-Rin was served her least favorite dish, soybean rice. Soybeans are good for the baby, her mother-in-law said, noticing her hesitation. I don't like soybeans, Sa-Rin replied. You have to eat them. It's good for the baby, her mother-in-law insisted. Sa-Rin gave in. Is it a boy or a girl? Her father-in-law asked. We won't know for a while, Sa-Rin answered. I hope it's a boy, he said. Your sister-in-law already has a girl. A boy would be perfect. Her mother-in-law then brought up having 2 children. Sa-Rin felt a surge of anger. Were women just baby-making machines? Have you ever met such a selfish mother-in-law? Her daughter-in-law was suffering from morning sickness, but she only cared about preparing delicious food for her son, completely ignoring Sa-Rin's preferences. As the older daughter-in-law was in a job interview, her mother-in-law called. She ended the call to continue the interview, but her mother-in-law called again. She reluctantly answered. I got some premium beef, her mother-in-law announced. I want to cook it for your husband. While her daughter-in-law tried to focus on work, her mother-in-law went on and on about her culinary skills, implying her daughter-in-law was too lazy to cook. "I'm making barbecue tonight," she continued. "Come home for dinner. Eating out isn't healthy." Her daughter-in-law told her she was busy and would call her back later. Seeing her daughter-in-law hang up, the mother-in-law complained to her husband that their daughter-in-law didn't care about her grandchild's health. Finally, the father-in-law made some sense. "Don't be so unreasonable," he told his wife. She replied, "She's lucky to have a mother-in-law like you. You put up with her attitude, take care of her child, and even cook for her." "Don't be ridiculous," she retorted. "Why should I have to put up with her? I take care of everything." "Stop keeping score," he said. "Why don't you check on Sa-Rin and see how her morning sickness is?" "I can't let Sa-Rin's husband eat whatever she's eating," she declared. "I need to make something delicious for my son." She was so focused on her son that she completely forgot about Sa-Rin. Sa-Rin's husband answered his mother's call. "Come over for dinner tonight," she said. "I'm making your favorite." "Sa-Rin's been having morning sickness," he replied. "She hasn't felt like eating much. I'm still making your favorite," she insisted. Hearing this, he eagerly agreed. Seeing how thin he'd gotten, his mother fussed over him. Later, Sa-Rin's sister-in-law discussed childcare with her husband. Though grateful to her mother-in-law, she felt uncomfortable. Their parenting styles clashed, and she hated having to constantly answer to her. "We haven't found a babysitter yet," her husband said. "Just be patient. I found a daycare nearby," she replied. "It has excellent childcare programs, and I can pick her up after work. I'll feel much better knowing she's well cared for." He couldn't understand leaving their daughter at daycare all day, seeing it as irresponsible. "It's the only way," she insisted, also heartbroken at the thought. He accused her of being intolerant and selfish for wanting to use daycare. As he walked away, she felt a wave of despair. The next morning, Sa-Rin woke up early for work. Her surprised husband offered to drive her, but she explained that taking the train would be faster, since she had an important meeting. Looking at the 2 pairs of shoes by the door, she made her choice. Standing on the crowded train, pregnant and uncomfortable, Sa-Rin stared at the food people were eating. Nausea overwhelmed her. She had to get off. She missed her important meeting. After work, her team leader offered to drive her home, suggesting she rest in the car. Just then, their manager rushed over, explaining his car was being repaired, and asking for a ride. Before her team leader could respond, he hopped in. On the drive, the team leader shot the manager a disapproving look. He, oblivious to Sa-Rin's pregnancy in the back, reclined his seat, forcing her to shift uncomfortably. He then suggested she hand over her project, adding insult to injury. "And I'd like to recommend someone I trust for this project," the manager continued. The team leader, unable to tolerate this any longer, argued that Sa-Rin had put a lot of effort into the project and was the most suitable person to continue leading it. That evening, Sa-Rin worked late. Her team leader, watching her, recalled her pregnancy and advised Sa-Rin to go home and rest. "Almost done," Sa-Rin replied. As the team leader turned to leave, Sa-Rin called her back to apologize. Her team leader brushed it off and offered words of comfort. Just then, Sa-Rin's mother-in-law called. "I heard you've been having a tough time with morning sickness," she said. "Try to eat something, and remind your husband to eat properly." Sa-Rin arrived home to a messy apartment. Her husband explained that it was all baby stuff. Exhausted, she wanted to rest, but he insisted she sit down. "I'm tired," she finally said. "I need to rest." After showering, she lay in bed, looking at her husband's increasingly thin face and the baby shoes he had bought. She thought about the pressures of her job and felt a wave of emotion. If you were Sa-Rin, how would you handle this situation? The next day, Sa-Rin's sister-in-law picked up her daughter from her in-law's house and noticed traces of fruit around her mouth. "Did you give her a kiwi?" she asked her mother-in-law. "She loved it," her mother-in-law replied. "I gave you a list of foods she can't eat," her daughter-in-law said. "It clearly stated no kiwi. You're too meticulous," her mother-in-law retorted. "If you keep this up, she'll get sick all the time and have a weak immune system. Children need age-appropriate food," her daughter-in-law explained. Her mother-in-law interrupted. "She can eat adult food now. Do you think I'd give my grandchild something bad?" For her daughter's sake, the daughter-in-law held her tongue. As she was leaving, her mother-in-law said, "You don't need to bathe her. I already took her to the bathhouse." Her daughter-in-law was horrified. "She's too young for a bathhouse. It's dangerous. Children need to adapt," her mother-in-law replied dismissively. Again, for her daughter's sake, she let it go. Just then, her sister-in-law arrived. The mother-in-law, her heart aching for her daughter, rushed to her room to talk. She brought out a wad of cash she had saved. "Take this," she said. "Find a better place to live." Her daughter said she would think about it. The mother-in-law felt a pang of guilt. She blamed herself for her daughter's situation. "If I hadn't forced you to marry him," she trailed off. "It's okay, Mom," her daughter reassured her. "I made my own choices." Back home, looking at her daughter in the car seat, Sa-rin's sister-in-law remembered her mother-in-law's words. She picked up the resignation letter she'd prepared. Though heartbroken to leave her job, she decided to resign for her daughter's sake. What would you do if you were her? The prolonged stress and work pressures took their toll on Sa-rin, landing her in the hospital. The doctor informed her husband that she was suffering from exhaustion and stress. While both she and the baby were fine, she needed rest. Her husband sat beside her bed, remembering her words and filled with guilt. Sa-rin's mother rushed to the hospital. Seeing her daughter in a hospital bed, she was heartbroken. She told her son-in-law she would stay and care for Sa-rin, temporarily closing her shop. Sa-rin's mother-in-law called, asking if she was at work. Sa-rin explained she was unwell and staying home for a few days. Her mother-in-law, seemingly unconcerned about Sa-rin's well-being, immediately asked about the baby. Upon hearing the baby was fine, she simply told Sa-rin to rest. Sa-rin's father-in-law, hearing she was ill, asked his wife where she was. She dismissively said Sa-rin was always getting sick. "I had to take care of my in-laws, work, and help my husband," she complained. He reminded her that times were different now and urged her to care for Sa-rin. She reluctantly agreed. Arriving at her son's apartment, she was surprised to see Sa-rin's mother there. She immediately worried that something was wrong with the baby. Sa-rin reassured her that it was just exhaustion. Then, showing no respect for her in-law, the mother-in-law scolded Sa-rin, saying this wouldn't have happened if she had quit her job earlier. Sa-rin quickly apologized. Her mother, watching this, felt a surge of protectiveness. She couldn't believe her daughter had to endure such treatment. As she was leaving, the mother-in-law pointedly told Sa-rin to quit her job and rest, letting her husband provide. After she left, Sa-rin's mother went to wash the dishes. Sa-rin, watching her mother's retreating figure, felt a mix of emotions. Later that night, her mother found her sitting alone and sat beside her, offering comfort. Sa-rin poured out her heart. "I thought I could do it all," she sobbed. "Marriage, my career, a baby. I'm failing at everything." "If you were Sa-rin, how would you turn things around?" Sa-rin's sister-in-law had a work emergency. She frantically called her husband, asking him to pick up their daughter from her mother's. He explained he had an urgent meeting and reassured her he would handle it. When he arrived at his mother's, she immediately asked why her daughter-in-law hadn't come. He explained that she had a work emergency. She always prioritizes work over her child. His mother complained. He explained he had no other choice. Just then, his father returned with their daughter, who had candy on her lips. He frowned. The shop owner next door gave it to her. "She's so cute," his father said proudly. "She's too young for candy," he said. "It'll ruin her teeth. She'll lose those teeth anyway," his mother said dismissively. "It's time you two thought about a second child," Sa-rin's father-in-law declared, his wife nodding in agreement. "A little brother would be nice," she added. "It's too early to think about that," their son replied. "You should have another one soon," his mother insisted. "I'll help you take care of them." He suddenly understood his wife's earlier concerns. His wife, rushing home from work to pick up their daughter, was stopped by her husband. "I'm sorry," he said. "I was wrong to blame you for wanting to work. We need to make a decision." He didn't want her to sacrifice her career. He surprised her by volunteering to stay home with their daughter. They visited a daycare, only to be told there was a 1-year waiting list. Sitting outside, they stared at the building. "Even daycare is difficult," he said. "Our daughter's too young to adapt." "I'm realizing that raising a child is much harder than giving birth," she admitted. Meanwhile, Sa-rin's mother-in-law, looking at her granddaughter's toys, felt a pang of longing. She wanted her son to bring the child over. Her husband told her not to worry. Let them enjoy their time off with their daughter. It's not easy for them. Back home, the older daughter-in-law showed her husband her resignation letter. "I've been planning this for a while," she said, "but I kept hesitating." "Are you truly happy at your job?" he asked. "Being a journalist is my dream," she replied. "Then pursue your dream," he said. "I'll take care of our daughter." "It's settled then," she said, smiling. Meanwhile, Sa-rin's sister received a text from her husband, asking to meet. At the restaurant, he handed her a document. It was the signed divorce papers she'd been waiting for, but she felt no joy, only a strange emptiness. "I got a job offer," he said. "I'll be leaving Korea soon. I want you to come with me. Let's start over." He promised to work hard and give her a happy life. She stared at him, confused. Why bring the divorce papers if he wanted to reconcile? "If you don't want to start over with me," he said, "I won't force you." She looked at him, then at the divorce papers, unsure what to do. Sa Rin's husband looked at his sleeping wife. He gently woke her up. "I brought home your favorite dumplings," he said. "I'll eat later," she mumbled. "I just want to rest." He went to the living room and told his mother-in-law that Sa Rin hadn't been feeling well. "I'll be there for her every step of the way," he reassured her. Sa Rin's mother worried about his work. "Work isn't more important than Sa Rin," her son-in-law said. He planned to take Sa Rin out to distress. Her mother was deeply touched by his consideration. As they were getting ready for their date, a coworker called, asking where Sa Rin kept the project files. She explained they were locked in her desk drawer and that she had the key. "The director wants to see them," her coworker said, worried. Sa Rin promised to bring the key immediately. She stopped at a coffee shop near her office and bought her coworkers their favorite drinks. "It's a little awkward to show up empty-handed," she told her husband, "and I really wanted to catch up with everyone over coffee." She arrived at the office, but her coworker said they no longer needed the files and apologized. Sa Rin tried to chat, but her team leader said they had a meeting with a client. Watching her coworkers busy at work, Sa Rin felt a pang of disconnect, as if she'd been left behind. "What if I quit my job?" she asked her husband later. He was taken aback. Sa Rin wandered through a nearby park, lost in thought. Her husband found her and handed her a pair of high heels. He apologized, surprising her. "I made a mistake," he said, explaining that he didn't want her to sacrifice her career because of the pregnancy. He promised to support her so she could find her joy again. Back at their homestay, he suggested they have coffee. Concerned about the baby, Sa Rin hesitated. "I checked with the doctor," he reassured her. "1 cup a day is fine." He then suggested a walk. A smile spread across Sa Rin's face. Her coworker called, thanking her for the coffee and asking when she'd be back. "It's so hard without you," she admitted. "Monday," Sa Rin replied. Her husband, watching her newfound confidence, beamed. "Do you think things will finally change for Sa Rin?" Sa Rin's younger sister, after deciding to divorce, was surprised by her husband's request for reconciliation. She had been so resolute, but seeing his changed demeanor, she wavered. She wasn't sure what to do about the new apartment she'd just rented. She went to her mother for advice. "I'm ready for a new life," she confessed, "but I'm scared. What if I can't make it on my own?" Her mother, after much deliberation, realized her daughter's happiness was paramount. "Don't worry about what others think," she said. "Be brave and choose your path to happiness." That same day, the older brother and his wife visited his parents. He announced his decision to quit his job and become a stay-at-home dad. His father was furious, but his mother, after hearing her son's explanation, was deeply moved. Sa Rin accepted the adjustments to her workload and continued to work diligently. Meanwhile, her best friend shared some exciting news. Her IVF treatment was successful. Hearing that her friend had already found a postpartum care center, Sa Rin realized how unprepared she and her husband were. They began researching, but their budget was tight. They visited several centers, but couldn't find the right fit. Either the cost was prohibitive, the scheduling didn't work, or they weren't satisfied with the services. Her husband suggested asking his mother for help, believing it was their best option. He seemed relieved to have a solution. They went shopping for baby items, but the price of strollers shocked them. That evening, Sa Rin's older brother treated them to dinner. He revealed that he had resigned from his job to become a stay-at-home dad. Sa Rin's husband worried about their own future. His brother and sister-in-law encouraged them, saying they would figure it out. When they heard that their younger brother wanted their mother to provide postpartum care for his wife, they burst out laughing. "Having mom provide postpartum care? We'd rather do it ourselves," they joked. Early one morning, Sa Rin struggled to put on her shoes because of her growing belly. Her husband gently helped her. Arriving at work, Sa Rin found her coworkers looking somber. Her boss approached her gravely, saying, "You've caused a big problem." Sa Rin panicked. Then her boss burst out laughing. "Your project was a huge success," he said. "We wanted to surprise you." Meanwhile, Sa Rin's parents-in-law were visiting her younger sister. Her mother, seeing how hard her daughter worked, brought her some home-cooked meals. Later, her daughter made them dinner. She seemed happy in her newfound independence. Seeing her daughter's smile, her father finally accepted her divorce and stopped criticizing her. A partner company, impressed by Sa Rin's work, expressed interest in collaborating exclusively with her. Thrilled, she told her husband, who immediately objected. Even though Sa Rin assured him the project wouldn't take much time, he remained unconvinced. This was a rare opportunity for Sa Rin, and she didn't want to give it up. They agreed to think it over. The next day, at her checkup, there was a problem. Sa Rin had low amniotic fluid, and her baby had shifted position. The doctor recommended a C-section. Sa Rin had no choice but to be hospitalized. What will happen to Sa Rin and her family? Like and subscribe for more videos.